Trump said that doesn't mean anything. It depends which states finish. Okay, Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Kuf Lamed Daled Basra. As we learned for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, Hanasuna Batzara V'Shivya. I want to take a look at yesterday's daf Amid Beis, where we discussed the issue: should a man is it okay for a man to disinherit one son or more if the son is not acting properly? So we had the Mishnah just said that the rabbis aren't happy if you disinherit one son over another or give more to one than another. Shmuel says, yeah, if they're not good, you can do that. So the question was, in the Gemara, did rabbis disagree with? The rabbis might have said, well, if everything else being equal, you shouldn't give more to one more than another. Rav Shmuel says, yeah, but if they're not acting properly, maybe you can. You should be blessed for that, in fact. So the question was, did the rabbis disagree with Shmuel? And we came out that Shmuel says, he paskin from Shmuel, yes, that it's wrong to do that, even to transfer the inheritance from one bad son to a good son. You shouldn't do that either. That's what Shmuel said, right? Shmuel's review, don't do a burech santa. Don't transfer from one to another. That's what we saw yesterday. That we said yesterday. Now, I want to look at the Rashbam about 10, 12 lines from the bottom of the page on Kuf Lamed Gimel Beis, yesterday's stuff. Toshma, Damalei Shmuel, Alma Pliger Rabban Alev. Since Shmuel says that, he's going like the rabbis, and Shmuel says you shouldn't. So in other words, if the rabbis would agree with Shmuel says it's proper to disinherit one son if he's not a good boy. Shmuel said that, but since Shmuel disagreed, he obviously felt like that the rabbis disagreed with Shmuel. Right? If you don't say that, Shmuel Damer, come on. If the rabbis agreed with Shmuel that it's proper to disinherit a wayward son, so who is Shmuel going like? Then the Rashbam says, "V'hochi hilchos say that's like the Rabbanan to come Shmuel kavasayu." But Afal Gav, this is an important Rashbam. Even though we have a rule, a general rule, Yochanan says that when Shmuel is mentioned in our Mishnah, we always pass like him, except for three famous cases in Shas. All other cases we pass from Shmuel. Shmuel doesn't hold that rule. The Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan had said that rule. Shmuel doesn't hold that. The Gam Rava, the Gomer Masechta Avodah Zarah Perek Chamishi, Halachim Shmuel, Leslie Nami Haklal. He doesn't hold that rule that the halacha is always like Shmuel except for three cases. Hilkach, Rashbam goes on. Kol Klolos Sheba Gemara. All the general rules we have in the Gemara. This is a great Rashbam Gemara. Go on. Halacha Kestam Mishnah. We paskin like an anonymous Mishnah. Halacha Rabbi Akiva Mechaver. We always paskin like Rabbi Akiva when he's arguing with one rabbi. Halacha Rabbi Yossi B'Chavero. The halacha is always like Rabbi Yossi if he argues with one person, right? Halacha Rabbi Shmuel b'Mishnah Seinu. If Rabbi Shmuel says the Mishnah, we paskin him. Rabbi Lezer, Yeshua, we have a rule. If Rabbi Lezer and Yeshua we go with Rabbi Yeshua. More common, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yehuda and Shimon argue a Mishnah, we go like Rabbi Yehuda. V'chein Rav Meir Rabbi Yehuda, that's a more common one, I think. Rabbi Yehuda, Kulu Kaimel and Hachi, we always that way. Bar Mehechem B'Farish Gemara Delesnach. In other words, that's a general rule. But if the Gemara says specifically otherwise, then we don't. In other words, the general rule is made to be broken, or that there are exceptions. It's not a general you can pass with. It's a general rule, but many times the Gemara goes against that, and that's what's important to realize.
True, unless it's not.
Right, unless it's not. And the Gemara says specifically. So yeah, it's a general rule, but many times the Gemara can not do with that klal, or maybe Shmuel doesn't hold, like he says, Shmuel doesn't hold of it, Rabbi doesn't hold that general rule. So these general rules are not something that you can pass. That's an important Rashbam. Then we had the story at the end of yesterday's daf, because this leads us into today's daf. What was the story? There's a story with a man who he had a son, or his sons. He had sons that were not acting properly. Gave everything to Yonasan ben Azil, the great Tana, Yonasan ben Azil. We'll see how great he was. What did he do? Yonasan ben Azil took all the assets. Let's say he had all assets. He sold a third for his own usage. He was makdish a third to the base of Mikdash, and he took a third and gave it back to the sons that the father was not happy with. So Shammai came to him screaming. He says, "What do you mean? You went against the wishes of the father. The father didn't want to do that." And Rashbam points out 2 lines from the bottom of the page in Rashbam. We're still in Kuf Lamed Gimel Amid Beis, and we hold mitzvah l'kaim divrei hames. You should. That's what the deceased person. That was his wishes, to take it away from his sons, and you've given it back to them. you're not the kind of MS, right? It's as if he said, I'm giving it to you on the condition that, for your usage, not to give it to my son. And it's a mitzvah to fulfill the words of the dying man. So why did you do that? So Yonasan ben Zil answered him, listen, look what I did first. I first sold a third for myself. I first gave a third to the base of Mikdash. Are you going to retract those gifts as well? You're saying what I first gave a third. I took care of a third for myself. I banked the third myself. I sold it, kept the money for myself. Then I gave a third to the base of Mikdash. Then I gave a third back to the children. You want to nullify, cancel what I've done to the children? So you're going to also nullify the hektish and the stuff that I took myself? If you can't do that, you can't take away what I gave to the children also. And what did Shammai said at the top of Kuf Lamed Daled? You're right. He says Omar in the second line. Omar, he said Shammai said after Yonasan ben Zil gave him that argument, he beat me. He beat me like he threw stuff at me. He won. He made me look foolish. Even though he said it, and he answered me, he says, look, just like you can't take away what I've gotten for myself when I gave to the base of you can't take away that either. Now, what does that mean? The real svara is because but he wasn't following the wishes of the deceased. The man gave Yonasan ben Zil everything because he was trying to avoid giving it to his kids, but he didn't say that. He didn't say it specifically. What happened? V'hu savar, the Gemara says v'hu savar in the third line on Kuflam v'hu savar mishamais beis chorim. In other words, Shammai thought that this was similar to the case of the famous story in Beis Choron, not far from here, right? On the way to Modi'in, Beit Choron. There's Mavo Choron and Beit Choron, right? Mavo Choron is on the left side of 443, and Beit Choron is on the right side. If you're going from here to Modi'in, right? So Mavo Choron is on the left, this is on the right. In any case, there was a story in Beis Choron. What happened? The Tanan, Ma'aseh Beis Choron was a story There was a story with a man who was making a wedding, and let's say he wasn't on good terms with his father. The father had sworn not to have any pleasure from the son, or the son had sworn not to allow his father to have any enough from him. They weren't on good terms, right? But he wanted the father to attend the wedding, even though they weren't on good terms. Maybe the father had forsworn any hanah from him. So what did he do? This man was making a wedding, and he wanted his father, the grandfather, to attend. He said to Yankel, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you the banquet hall and the meal. It's all yours. I'm giving you the whole thing. It's only for yours. I'm giving it to you. So this way, my father, who's forbidden to have enough from me, he's not having enough from me. I gave you the wedding meal and the hall and everything. The whole thing, the whole $100,000 that I'm spending on the wedding, giving it to you. And then he's having enough from you. So there's nobody, he's not being over, he's not going against the vow, whether the son made the vow or the father made the vow. Amar lo, so Yankel, who was the recipient, who was his friend, said, Im Shali, if it belongs to me, or Mikdash, I'm giving it to the base of Mikdash. If you're giving it to me wholeheartedly, I'm giving it away. I am Mikdash Shemayim. Amar lo, I didn't give it to you to give away. Amar lo nasati l'cha es shali. I only gave you mine. Lo nasati l'cha es shali shetakdishim shema. I didn't give it to you to be makdish. I only gave it to you to avoid having my father have pleasure for me. Amar lo, so Yankel answered him, Lo nasat li esrecha. You only gave me el shetei ata v'avicha ochlim v'shosin. You only gave it to me so that you guys can eat and drink together, maratzim and be happy with one another, right? Pacify one another. Ve'avan toli barosho, and the sin will be mine because I'm the one who's aiding and abetting this by allowing it to happen. But you didn't really give it to me. If you gave it to me, I could do with what I want. I can cut a shanisha. I can give it to the beis fish. You're not giving it to me for that. That's not a gift. You didn't really give it to. Amr chachamim. So the chacham said, Kol matana she'ena, any gift, she'en mikdishim mukdesh, any gift which you give, which is not, I can't be makdish it if I want to, ain't a matana. So basically, so you didn't really give it wholeheartedly. You gave it to me just to avoid that. Now, so when Shammai knew this story, so Shammai said here also, the father just gave all his assets to Yonasan ben Zil to avoid the son, right? To avoid the son. But he didn't really mean to give it to him. He didn't mean to give it to him wholeheartedly. He just wanted to avoid the son. So therefore, you can't give it back. You can't give it to the son. It's like he gave it to you on the condition that you don't give it to the son. I gave it to you on the condition that he'll use it, he'll be makdish, he'll give whatever, but he can't give it to the son. But he didn't say that. So Shammai heard the story, the famous story, Ma'aseh Beis Charon, and Yankel said to the person making the wedding, "Oh, you're not really giving it to me. You're just giving it to me to avoid him, but it's really still yours, because if it was mine, I could do with it as I please. You didn't really give it, even though you could give matana amanas lahachzer, right? Amanas lahachzer, giving it to you on the kitchen, you're going to give it back to me if you weren't makdish it. But if you really makdish it, like when a person gives a lulav, right, to somebody on the first day, you have to give it back. You have to give it to a girl. He has to give it back to you. So matana amanas lahachzer. But let's say the recipient of the lulav was makdish it would be good. Because, I'm giving it back to you if it's still mine, but it's not mine anymore. Here, he didn't really give it to him. So Shammai thought this is the same thing. I'm only giving it to you on the condition that you don't give it to my son. And if you give it to my son, that's no good. But that wasn't the case, because that was what fooled him. Because in the case of Yonasan ben Azil, he never said that. If you say so, I'm giving it to you on this condition, fine. But he didn't say that. Tan Rabbanan, who is this Yonasan ben Azil? We all know the Targum Yonasan ben Azil. We have Targum Yonasan ben Azil on the Chumash and on Nach, just like Unkelos. Tana Rabbanan, Shimon Tamir, famous story. Hillel Zakan had 80 students. Shloshim, the top 30, Ruyim Shetishlam Shechina. They were fit that the Shechina, the holy countenance, can be rest on them. Moshe Rabbeinu, like Moshe Rabbeinu, they were roy to be as great as Moshe Rabbeinu. Shloshim, the lower 30. I said 30 or 30. The top 30 were roy to be the Shechina, like Moshe Rabbeinu. Shloshim, the lower 3, Ruyim Shetam Chama. Yoshua ben Nun, or that the sun should stop for them like Yoshua ben Nun, even though it stopped for Moshe also, but this is considered less of a miracle. Esrim ben, in the middle 20, 30, and 20 is 80, right? So the middle 20, Gadol Shabbakulan, the greatest among them was Yonasan ben Azil. In other words, he was what? Number 31, I guess, in greatness. Katan Shabbakulan, the smallest or the lowest stature of these 20, I guess that would be what? Number 49, right? So I guess so, right? Shabbakulan, or number 50, actually, number 50. Shabbakulan from Yochanan Zakai. So what did they say about Yochanan Zakai? Shaliniach, we're at the first of the Y lines in the Gemara. Shaliniach Mikra Mishnah, he didn't leave anything in us. He was able to learn every single thing. Mikra, Chumash, Mishnah, Mishnayos, Gemara, halachas, vagodas halachas, and the narratives in the throughout Shas, Tikdukei Torah, all the tiyukim. Rashbam says the Torah is like you darshan above, you darshan a letter here and there. The Dikdukei Sofrim, the Gzeiros that the rabbi said, the Kal Chamurim, Kal V'chomer, Gzeiros Shabbos, he knew everything. Kufos, the idea of when is the molad, all the astronomy, gematria, we know what that is, the numerical things. Rashbam says that's more like the acronyms. You have an acronym, what is it referred to? Again, it's darshaning the letters. Umishalos Kofs and Mishalos Shum, these are famous examples, metaphors that were said like by Fullers and by Foxes. These were just ways that the Shlomo Melech taught, etc. Examples. Sichas Shadim, the way Shadim spoke, and Rashbam says that's in order to be able to be mashbi on them. As you knew what they were saying, so you knew you could talk to them. Sichas Kolam, it says like the speech of trees. And what does he mean by the speech of trees? The trees speak. Rashbam says, Vayedaber, brings on a pasuk by Shlomo, says, Vayedaber Leitzim. Shlomo was able to look at a tree and knew how to heal it. If a tree was sick, he knew the potion for it. He knew how to heal it. He also knew what these trees are good for. These trees are good for building this. These trees are good for building that. He was an expert in everything. V'sichas malach esharis. He knew what the angels spoke. V'davar gadol, v'davar katan. What do we mean by davar gadol? Ma'aser merkava, to understand the ma'aser merkava in Yecheskel. V'davar katan, avayis abayav rava, the questions, abayav rava, the questions, the answers. V'kayim mashenemer, to fulfill what's written in the pasuk and Mishlei. L'hanchel oav hayesh. Always have that at the end of the mekasiyim oav hayesh, to cause to inherit, to bequeath to the ones who love me substance. And Yesh is gematria 310, so there's 310 alamas. Those are saying Amali, the pasuk says, and I will fill their treasure houses. And as Hashem will give them Torah. If the young, since the cotton Shabbakulam came, if the youngest one among them, and not youngest, I mean the smallest one among them in stature, Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai is so, So Rabbi Yochanan ben Azil, who was the highest of the middle 20, you can imagine how great he was. They said about him, when he's learning Torah, any bird that flew over him, this was burned from the fire of Torah. That's because that's how great Yonasan ben Azil actually was. Now we come to the next Mishnah. Now we learned before that a man is believed. Pasuk says that a man is believed to say he has 5 sons. He comes into town and he's believed to say this is the Bechor. This is the Bechor. He's believed to say it's the Bechor. As we had before, it was machlokas whether he's believed even if it's against the chazaka, or certainly everybody agrees. If he comes to town and says, this is my son, this is the Bechor, he is believed, right? We had that before. Is he believed even against a chazaka, right? Or only when there's no chazaka against that. That was a machlokas we had before, but everybody agrees that he's believed to identify him. But let's say he says, this is my son, this is my son. Why shouldn't you believe him? We'll see. But he says, he's believed. He says, this is my brother, he's not believed. Right? What is it? Who cares? Who cares if it's his brother or not? We'll see it. But we'll see it's talking about a case where the other brothers, he has several brothers. And he comes, one brother shows up and he says, this is our brother too. The other brother doesn't believe him. He has another brother. Everybody, these are 2 brothers. And one brother says, that's Reuven Shimon. And Reuben says, Levi is also brother. Shimon doesn't believe. Shimon doesn't know. He says, I don't know that he's my brother. I never saw him before. In other words, the father maybe got married somewhere else, had another son, and he's not believed to say that. We'll see. So what should you do in a case like that? What happens in a case like this? The Yaakov dies, left 2 sons, Reuben and Shimon. And Reuben says, there's another brother, Levi. Shimon says, I don't believe it. Why? I never saw him before. Why should I give him anything? The father had a Yerusha. He had 3 fields. How do you divide it up now? Shimon says there's only 2 brothers. We're splitting it 50-50. I get 1.5 fields and you get 1.5 fields. But Reuben says that Levi's another brother. So Reuben says that Levi should get one of the fields. Well, Shimon doesn't agree with that. We have no other evidence. So what happens in a case like that? Reuben takes 1.5 fields, like Shimon agrees. Shimon takes for sure 1.5 fields. Reuben takes 1.5 fields and gives half the half field. He gives that to Levi because he says he's a legitimate brother. He says, Shimon, you should also give the other half of the field, the other half that you got, you should give that to Levi too. But Shimon says, I don't know that he's my brother. So that the yitel ima b'chelko. In other words, when you split it 2 ways between Reuben and Shimon, Levi can take, according to Reuben, Levi's a brother too, so he should give him half of that 3rd share. Mace, let's say down Levi dies now. What happens? Well, Shimon already took 1.5. So he's not going to get anything from that, right? Shimon already took 1.5 fields from Yaakov's Yerusha. So according to him, he never gave Levi anything anyway. But if he dies now, the half a field that Levi got from Reuven will go back to Reuven, right? Because if Levi died, if that's all he had. Let's say this Levi became a rich man on his own, not from the Yerusha of Yaakov, their father. Became a rich man on his own. He dies now. What happens?
With no kids.
No kids, yeah, no kids. Who gets everything?
Well, Reuben say it's his brother, so Reuben should get everything.
Yeah, but according to Reuben, Shimon should also get. According to Reuben, he's a legitimate brother. Shimon should also get, and that's what happens, right? So that's what he says. If he had other assets, Levi, everybody shares in it. Because Reuben can't say, well, I'm going to take everything now because I was the only one who claimed he's a brother. But according to you, he's a legitimate brother. So if he's a legitimate brother, he gets a share too. Now, says the Gemara, Zebni Neman, says, if this is my son, Neman, so what halacha? Now, what do you mean? He's believed to say he's my son. You could always believe to say my son. You want to give him a gift, right? All right, but Shmuel liyorsho, he gets an inheritance. Okay, he gets an inheritance. He's my son. Well, couldn't he give him as a gift anyway? Well, he could give it to him as a gift anyway. What's the big deal? The answer is, yeah, he can give him as a gift what he has now. But let's say the father now dies, and then other assets come into the estate, right? Some great uncle passed away and left him $1 million. Okay, a bechor doesn't get a double share in that, right? And a bechor notel b'roikum muchzik, and a husband doesn't get b'roikum muchzik, but regular children do. So he's believed to say liyorsho, yeah, he's my son, and he would get a legitimate share, Okay. The lifter asishtam and yibam. Oh, very good. Remember, when does yibam take place? When a man dies with no children and at least one brother, right? At least one brother, paternal brother, right, from the father's side. So let's say so if he says this is my son, let's say the man had no other sons, right? The man had no other sons, and he had a brother. He had a brother. So what happens now?
Who had a brother?
The man who died had died with that brother. He had no sons. And he had a brother. So his wife was ready to make yibum, right? His wife is in a situation where if he dies, there should be yibum with the husband's brother. But he said, I have a son. Son, there's no yibum. So as he says, so what my we say, I believe to say he's my son. Number one, that he's going to get a Yerusha, even later on. And number two, the lifter asishta mena yibum. And also that his wife, that a man died. His wife, says Gemara, Eliyarsho Pshita. Certainly he's going to get an inheritance, right? Isn't it obvious? Rashbam says, listen to this. Take a look at Rashbam. The big boy, he can give it to him right now. He can't. Assets are going to come in later. He can't give them to him now. Neman, halav milsi, devade ain't a neman. Not what I said before. He's my son. He's my son. He's my son to get a Yerusha. Why? Because I could give him the stuff right now anyway. But he's not necessarily the son. He claims he's a son. But later on, let's say assets came into later on after he claimed being the son. No. If he gets assets, he could always give it to the son if he claims this is his son. But he's not believed for that. Migu is, I could give it to him right now, but you can't give what you don't have. So if the father get assets later on, or if the father died and assets came into the estate, then he wouldn't get that. That was for a Bechor, yes, a Bechor he's believed. He's believed that the Torah says he's believed. But over here, he's only believing what he has right now. Therefore, Liyorsha meaning he's only didn't believe to inherit him what he has right now, because he could give it to him anyway right now if he wanted to. So he's only believed for that. Says
the assets that come in later.
Again, the Bechor would not get a double share. If the assets are coming late, no. So we're saying this. A man has 3 sons, and he says, this is also my son. This is also my son. He's only believed to give him what he has right now, because he could give him, he could take 25% of his assets and give it to the son right now anyway. Let's assume there's no Bechor, just 4 sons. He has 3 sons, and he says, this is also my son. I had a son with another woman, overseas that you guys didn't know about. And he's saying, this is my son. He's only believed for what he has right now, but assets came in later on. Let's say the man died, and then assets came into his estate, and those assets would be divided equally among the sons. This son wouldn't get it, according to what Rashbam says. Liosha Pshita, says Pshita that he can give him what he has right now, but not what he has later on. Even that Pshita is only what he has right now. The lifter asasto it's. So he says, when he's believed to say this is my son, is for 2 things. Number one, that he gets an inheritance of what he has right now. Number 2, that his wife wouldn't have to fall yibam. So the Gemara says that's also it's hanami tanina. We've learned that before too. What are you teaching me over here? We've already learned that before. Tanya, we learned in Yavamas, right, or in Kedushin. Right, we said Misham B'Shas Misas. A man when he dies says Yeshli Banim Neman. I've got sons. He's believed. I've got sons, so she doesn't fall yibam. Yeshli Achim Eino Neman. If he has brothers, he's not believed. Meaning he has brothers that he wants to mechayev the woman for yibam. If a man dies and he has no sons and no brothers, so she is standing, she can get married to whoever she wants. In other words, she knows that her husband's dying. She's already thinking ahead what about the funeral, after the funeral, the shiva, who's going to bring the food. She's thinking about all these things. Then she's saying, what do I have to do afterwards? Is there yibam or not? Well, if he has no brothers and no children, no yibam. That's what she is assuming. So he says, Misham, let's say when he dies, he says, I have sons. He's believed. Oh, that's a big chiddush, right? Because she assumed that he has no sons. Yeshli Achim says he has my brothers, Einon. So we see over here also, this mission in Kedushin already taught this. If he says that he has sons, he's believed. If he has brothers, he's not believed. So haven't we learned this idea before also? This idea that if a man says, I have a son, he's believed for what he has now. And to Patra's wife from Yibam, right? So again, you believe, we're talking about the son. You believe about the son. You believe a son for Yerusha, that we know, and you believe for the Yibam. Well, we already had that in the Mishnah Kedushin. If a man says, I have a son, he's believed. It says, there we didn't know he had a brother. So if he didn't know he had a brother, right? And there's no none that he didn't have any sons. We didn't know he had any sons. We didn't know he had any brothers. So there, when he had no sons and no brothers, so what was she standing to do? She was standing to get remarried plain. She didn't have any even. There was no brothers, no sons. So if he says, I have a son, right? If he says, I have a son, that he's believed, right? He's not going against, right? We didn't know that he had a son. So he didn't know that he had a brother. So she wasn't standing to have Yibam anyway. So if he says a son, he's not going against the Chazaka because she wasn't going to have Yibam anyway. Hacha over here, even though he has a brother. And if we know he has a brother, the assumption is that she's going to fall Yibam. He still believed. Here says Rashbam. Take a look at Rashbam. There's a narrow area of the Rashbam, and then there's the wider area and the most wide area. The last line of the middle area, right? The area that's not real wide. See the Mishnah, Rashbam says there, Hacha. Hacha asashminan, the afag of the muchsak islay achi, even though we know he has brothers. So she's standing for Yibam. Chazaka ba'alma below Adam. It's only a chazaka. Afilu hachi yomer zebini. If he says this is my son, so that there's no Yibam, right? At the time that he's dying, the assumption is that she's gonna fall Yibam because he has brothers. That's what we're teaching over here. He has brothers, so it's gonna be Yibam. But now he wakes up and he says, you know what? I have a son somewhere. There's no Yibam. You still believe him. That's it. This woman is standing to make Yibam. There's arrangements already, right? There's arrangements already. He's dying. He has a brother. She's going to assume that she's going to make Yibam, right? That's what she's assuming, that there's going to be Yibam because he has a brother. And he says, I have a son. So there's no Yibam. No, nobody knew about the son. He says, Yeshli Banim, because nobody knew about the son. If they knew there was a son, there would be no Yibam, right? He says, I have a son in St. Louis somewhere, right?
Rashbam says Zebini.
Right. He says, Zebini. No, it doesn't make any difference. He says Zebini. Hey, he shows up there, whatever, it doesn't make any difference. But he says, I have a son. Why?
Because
if he says I have a son,
insisting that the son be there.
No, I don't think he doesn't mean that. He just says he just is pointing out because the Zebini is for the Yerushas. He's just saying it makes an afkamina for the even too. I don't think it makes it. It doesn't have to actually be there. So the point is, I have a son. So even though the chazak is that she's going to make even because there was a brother, they didn't know about any son, and he says I have a son, he's believed taking it. Why is he believed? There's a chazaka that she's going to have even, right? A man is dying. It's not known that he has any children. It's known that he has a brother. So the assumption is she's going to fall Yibam. If he dies right now and he doesn't say anything, there has to be Yibam or Chalitza, right? Because he left a brother. And on his deathbed, he says, I have a son. Or this is my son. Makes no difference. I don't think it makes any difference. He says, I have a son. Right? You believe him. Why do you believe him? He's pattering her from Yibam, right? The Chazak is that she spoke to Yibam. And he says on his deathbed, he wants to avoid the issue of Yibam and Chalitza. Maybe he has a brother. Happens cases here that, there's a man dies and he has a brother. The brother's not religious and doesn't want to take part in Yibam, Chalitza. That's a whole problem. So he wants to patter up from Yibam. He says, I got a son somewhere. Right? So in the case that you believe him, why do you believe him? Says Rashbam, and the Gemara is going to say, because Amiga, if he wants to, he can give her a get right now. He's still alive. He can give her a get. If he wants to patter up from Yibam, he can get her a get. Since they have Amiga, they believe. That's back in the Gemara. Hanamikin in the second line of Gemara. What are you teaching me? Pater from Yibam. We already learned that. Misham Rabishas Misasi Yeshli Banim Neman. Yeshli Ach. If he says I have a brothers, ain't a Neman. He's not believed there. Not believed to say I have brothers. If it's not known that he has brothers. It says Hasam Lo Muslim Mach there. We didn't know he had a brother. So if we didn't know he had a brother, there was not going to be Yibam anyway. So if he says I have a son, big deal. Okay, you have a son. So it doesn't make a difference for the Yibam because we didn't know he had a brother. Even though we know he had a brother, so she's standing to make Yibam if the husband dies with no children. He's believed even there. Why? Because he has a migo. Why is he believed to say and to pater his wife from Yibam? Since we say since if a man says I divorced my wife, he's believed, so he could divorce her. Right? Tanya, you're learning a Mishnah. The reason why we say a man is believed to say I have a son and to pater his wife from Yibam is because if a man says I divorced my wife, he's believed. First of all, that's not a Mishnah. So how can you explain a Mishnah from just a memra? And second of all, we need a reason for that too. Why do you say that If a man is believed to say, I divorced my wife, why is he believed? You're explaining something without with something which is not explained. But totally Tanya, but all Tanya. Shmama says that Rabbi Yosef got sick and forgot his learning, and when he learned things from Yehudi, he forgot the reasons. So he says, "What's going on over here?" He says, "This must what Shmuel meant is what his Rebbe Yehuda said." Takes out the Rabbi Yehuda, right? He says, Shmuel, that Shmuel said it like this. Why is a person believed to say that this is my son, or I have a son? Since he could divorce her right now. Again, you're going against a chazaka. A woman, you have Reuben is dying. He has a wife, Leah. Leah would have to fall Yibum to Shimon, because we know he has a brother Shimon. But on his deathbed, Reuben says, I have a son, so there's no Yibum. Why is he believed? Maybe he's just trying to get her to avoid her having to Yibum. He's believed because if he wanted to, he can give her a divorce right now. Then she wouldn't have Yibum anyway.
That costs money.
It doesn't cost any money. You write it down. You could write it in your own handwriting. And of course, you couldn't marry a Kohen, but okay. But he can get it out of that way. That's like the whole Gasha. Omer Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef says, oh, that makes sense. In other words, not that you believe a person say he divorced his wife, but since he could divorce her right now, he's believed when he says I have a son, then she doesn't have to give him because he could divorce her right now. Omer Rav Yosef. Once you say that a person is believed, listen what Rav Yosef says. Since you say that he's believed to say, I have a son, and she doesn't have to give him. Why? Because he could divorce her. A person who says, I divorced my wife is believed. Okay, here's the point. He says, if a man says to come along and says, I divorced my wife, she's divorced. You believe him, even though there's no evidence. We have no Adam or anything like that. Since you could divorce her right now. That's what Rabbi Yosef says. Rabbi Yosef came from Israel. He said, name Rabbi Yochanan, no. He's not believed. You're not believed to say, where's the evidence? Where's the proof? People hear about these things. Does she have a receipt or something? Does she have a get? No. Rav Sheshes got upset, was shaking his hands, says, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. You say, since you say that a man could divorce his wife now, therefore he's believed to say that that he divorced his wife in the past. Rashi said, you said that, yeah, right. He says, well, he says, look, if that's the case, that's what Rabbi Yosef said before. What Rabbi Yosef said, that's once since you say that a person is believed, to say that right. When he say hoel, damin and hoel. Since we say hoel, since you say a person could divorce his wife now, he's believed to say that I divorced my wife in the past. I divorced my wife in the past. So Rav Sheshes said, oh, but there also holds Rabbi Yosef. In other words, Rabbi Yosef says that since a man is believed to say, since a man is able to divorce his wife right now, he's believed to say, I divorced my wife in the past. And Rav Sheshes said, oh, so the whole of Rabbi Yosef is gone. In other words, Rabbi Yosef said, since a person could divorce his wife now, he's believed to say, I divorced from the past. Rabbi Yitzchak said, no, you're not believed to say you divorced your wife in the past. So you're not believed that. So, and Rabbi Sheshes said, oh, you see that, not like Rabbi Yosef. You can't say, since you have the ability to divorce her now, you're believed to say you divorced in the past. A different version of Rabbi Yochanan said that what? That Baal Shem Megash is Ishi Neman. So we have two conflicting views of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef said that Rabbi Yochanan said, you're not believed to say you divorced your wife in the past. What evidence do you have? Rabbi Rabban said, a person is believed to say, I divorced my wife in the past, since he could divorce her right now. So he seemed to have a steer in Rabbi Yochanan. A person's not believed to say, I divorced her in the past, because he doesn't have the ability to divorce her retroactively. He's believed to say, I divorced my wife going forward, because he could divorce her right now, but he can't say in the past. Rashbam gives this example. Let's say a man back in a man is now, let's say Nisan and Iyar, right? Nisan comes before Iyar. A man says in Iyar, Rosh Chodesh Iyar, I divorced my wife back in Nisan. Not believed that. You know what happened in the middle of Nisan? Leila Seder, she was Mazana. While he was having the four kosas, she was Mazana with somebody, right? So as people see that she was Mazana, he says, no, I divorced her back in Nisan. Not believed for that. If he says, I divorced her, I'm divorcing her now, or I've divorced her from right now, okay, there you could, because you could divorce her right now if you want to, but you can't divorce her retroactively. So that's what he means. He says, you know what? No kasha. There are two versions of Rabbi Yochanan. When he says not believed retroactively, to say she was divorced a month ago, because you can't divorce her right now retroactively, that doesn't work. The same, but going forward, you could. Okay, what about if he says I divorced her retroactively? Does it help for going forward? That's the kasha Marsnai Boilu. Let's say he says I divorced her a month ago. Do you believe him going forward? Right? Me again, do we split his words and we say, okay, we believe you that you divorced her, but not from back then, only from going on. Or do we split his words or not? Rav Meir, Rav Zvid, Chadamar Plagin, one said we do split his words, and he's believed going forward. What's the nafkamina that he's believed? That she's divorced, that if he dies now, there's no yibum, right? That she can't marry a Kohen, etc., right? So Rav says, how do you say lo plagin? How is this different than Rava's rule in Sanhedrin? Rava, listen to this. A man testifies his wife committed adultery, and the man saw her commit adultery. Let's say there was Adam and Asra, whatever, and there's another witness to it also. Can he testify against his wife? No, because he's married to her, right? He's a mishpacha, kar mishpacha, can't testify. But he can testify against the adulterer, right? It's not related to him. He's sort of angry at him too, right? So can he testify? He says, yes. Ish ploni bal ishti. A man says that Yankel committed adultery with this man's wife. Hu va'acham estafim hargo. Him and another witness, in other words, the husband and another witness can start to kill him, even though they can't kill the wife because he can't testify against his wife. Laharga. So you see, you do split his testimony. You believe him when he says this man committed adultery with the wife as far as the man goes, not as far as the woman goes. It says betray, that's different. They're two different people. Betray guf paginan, b'chad guf lo paginan. So if he says I divorced my wife retroactively, would it help for the future or not? Maybe not. Okay, so we can't determine that right now. But what are we saying? We're saying, is a man believed to say, I divorced my wife? Retroactive. So one shita says no, one shita says yes. So we want to say, well, that's retroactively you're not believed, but going forward you could, because you could divorce her right now. Here we have a story on the top of Kuf Lamed Hey. Hoda, because a man was dying. And he had brothers, but no sons, right? Brothers, so therefore she was a chazaka that she was going to fall yibam, right? That as soon as he died, she's going to have to do yibam or chalitza with his brother, right? Or brother is one of the brothers. So man was dying. Amulei, they said to him, Issa Selaman, who's your wife going to go to, right? When you die, what's going to happen with your wife? The assumption was that since he had brothers, that she was going to have yibam. Amalu, he said, Chazi Lakana Rabba, she's fit to marry a Kohen Gadol. That doesn't mean literally a Kohen Gadol, because what he's saying effectively is why is she fit to marry a Kohen Gadol? He had brothers. She can't marry anybody else. She has to have even with the brother. Oh, he just meant to say, I've divorced her. I've divorced her. No. Even a Kohen can't marry, even a regular Kohen can't marry her if she's divorced. He doesn't mean right. I understand, but he's just sort of saying that she doesn't have to fall yibam over here. She can marry whoever she wants. So kind of Rob is just a loose phrase saying she can marry whoever she wants. Of course, she can't marry a Kohen because he's saying I divorced. She can't even marry a regular Kohen. He's just saying that she's free to marry. That's what he really means to say. Amarava, or what's it? Amaraba. My nechashla. What's the concern? What's the concern? Ha'amar of Chia Barab Yochanan said, Baal Shem Megarash Yaseh. She's name is believed. So what's the problem over here? And it was known that he had a brother, no children. So he's not saying I have a child, but he's saying she can marry whoever she wants. She doesn't have to kafal yibam. What's the concern? He's saying basically, I've divorced her. Well, we've learned if a man says I divorced my wife, he's believed. Amli Abaya. But we had the other shita in Rabbi Yochanan. We just learned those two shitas, right? Rechia Baraba said in Rabbi Yochanan that a Baal's believed to say divorce his wife. Abaya said to him, we have Kiyas Rabbi Yitzchak by Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yitzchak by Yosef came from Eretz Yisrael. He said, he said, Rabbi Yitzchak by Yosef said, Rabbi Yochanan said, Baal Shem Megav Shesish. Ain't an Emma. It's not believed. Omerle, so that's what Abaya complained. Omerle, so Rabbah said, yeah, but me lo shaninu. Didn't we already explain the difference? Kan l'mafreya, kan l'aba, right? One is going backwards and going forwards. When do you say he's not believed to say she got divorced a month ago, maybe to get her out of a adultery claim or whatever the reason was, right? Going backward, but going forward, maybe it would be believed. So Abaya said, about Shanuya Nekim Velismach, we're going to be, that's a nice answer. You have two different sheets like we have here. Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef, Rabbi Chia Bar Rabin, we have many times Rav Dimi, they reported Rabbi Yochanan said, but there were misunderstandings or whatever. So we want to reconcile the two sheets. Did Rabbi Yochanan say a person is believed to say I divorced my wife or is not believed? So you say, oh, he's not believed going backwards retroactively, but he is believed going forward, right? He is believed going forward. That's your answer. But we're going to rely on that right now. Here we have a situation when a man is dying on his deathbed. And he said, what about your wife? If he wouldn't have said anything, he's dead, there would be Yibam. And he says, oh, I've taken care of it already. She's free to marry, meaning I've divorced her. You're going to believe him right now, even going Labah? Oh, well, you said he's not believing. Oh, may not believe Mafreya, maybe Labah, but who says that that's really the answer? Maybe Rav Chia Bar Yosef, Rav Chia Bar Rabin's report that Rabbi Yochanan said that she is believed, maybe he's inaccurate, maybe it's not true. Amalei Rav Rav Nasan Barimi Chushla, you have to be concerned about that. In other words, you should be concerned that maybe he didn't divorce her. Rabba first said, what's her concern about? Rabbi said he's believed. Rabbi said that the other report was that she's not believed. Yeah, but we said not believed only in Mafreya. Maybe he is believed going forward. We don't know that that's really the answer. That's a nice answer to reconcile the two Amaram explaining Rabbi Yochanan. But we're going to rely on that right now. I think she should at least get chalitza because maybe he's not believed to say divorce. So maybe he says, oh, she's free to marry because he doesn't want her to fall yibam. But we can't rely on that. Now, Rashbam says a reason. Rashbam, below where we are in the Gemara, we're going to stop here in the Gemara, the next story, Yahu. But below in the Gemara, I don't know how to, the Divrei Amasul is way up above Hamar B'chia Baraba. But further down, Avram, I don't know how to point out where that is. It's a little bit further down in the narrow lines. He says, right? He says, lower me amigu. You don't say, in other words, what's going on over here? He's not believing at all. The lower me amigu, he could divorce her right now. Why should I It's probably he didn't divorce her. If he would have divorced her, people would have heard about it. And then Rashbam goes on in the next Rashbam. That's Divrei Maschu Chushla. Kabaya, like Abaya said, maybe you can't trust him that he really divorced her, but he also she can't get married. What are you concerned about? And he's not believed. Because a man comes along and says, I divorced my wife. No proof, no get, no receipt, no nothing, no item. Nobody heard about it. You're not divorced. You have to be concerned that she's not really. And therefore, we come out that the answer that we said, yeah, Mafreya, certainly Mafreya, he's not believed, but even Labal is also, if you want to divorce her right now. But you're not believed to say I divorced her, even going forward, because otherwise people would have heard about it. In other words, the Migu is against the Chazaka, and therefore it's Reglaim with over that she's really not divorced. So we'll pick it up here tomorrow, Mr. Shem. Have a good day, everybody. Call Tuf. Surah to vote. Don't forget to vote early and vote often if you haven't already.